A king who spends the years of his reign not in his native palace, but in luxury hotels, thousands of miles away from his country. A secret harem of women flown in by taxpayer-funded planes. An immense fortune, tens of billions of dollars hidden from curious eyes. A coronation more reminiscent of an ancient mystical rite than a modern state ceremony, surrounded by fear and secrecy. Fantastic spending on private jets, palaces covered in gold, and whims that seem like scenes from a grotesque play. The disappearance of his official consort, followed by her sudden return, strange reshuffles in the army and the courts. And behind it all, the shadow of a king the world outside calls the playboy monarch. His subjects fear even to speak his name aloud, yet he alone determines the future of Thailand. To understand how Vajiralongkorn became one of the most controversial figures of modern monarchy, we must return to the origins, to the day when fate made him heir, even though at first he was never considered an ideal candidate. He was born on July 28, 1952, in the luxurious chambers of the Dusit Palace. As the only son of King Bhumibol Adulyadej and Queen Sirikit, he was placed at the center of immense expectations from the moment of his birth. His sister, Princess Ubulratana, was already active in public life, but everyone understood it would be him who carried the dynasty forward. From an early age, the boy was surrounded by titles, ceremonies, and privileges. But beneath this outer splendor was a child growing up in a gilded cage, where every detail of his life had already been predetermined. In adolescence, he was sent to study in England, and later in Australia, where he underwent military training and received his first experience in command. But along with this emerged another side of his character, a passion for speed, expensive cars, and indulgence. At the age of 20, the prince received the title of heir to the throne. Yet even then, many doubted whether he could live up to the greatness of his father. His image, free-spirited, sharp, and far from that of a model monarch, became increasingly visible. As Vajiralongkorn grew into adulthood, his life became a constant mixture of state duties and personal scandals. If his father embodied restraint and service to the people, the future king more and more often displayed a completely different image, that of an unpredictable man driven by passions and whims. From the very beginning, his private life became a source of loud stories. In 1977, he married his cousin, Princess Soamsawali Kitayakara. The marriage was considered a favorable union within the dynasty, but behind closed doors it quickly began to crumble. The couple had a daughter, yet the prince's heart belonged to another woman. Actress Yuvadhida Pulprazerth. This affair was so open that hiding it was pointless. They had 5 children together, but the marriage between the prince and Soamsawali collapsed entirely only in 1993. At that time, the heir to the throne publicly blamed his wife for the failure of their union, while under Thailand's harsh laws, she could not utter a word in her own defense. A year later, he officially married Yuvadhida, and it seemed a victory of personal feeling over court protocol. But the idyll was short-lived. Within 2 years, she fled with their children to the United Kingdom. In response, the enraged prince accused her of infidelity and stripped the children of their royal titles. Yuvadhida later moved to the United States to begin a new life, while in Bangkok, her name was hardly spoken. But the scandals did not end there. In 2001, he married palace aide Shrirasmi Suwadi. This union appeared to be a step closer to the common people. His chosen bride came not from aristocracy, but from an ordinary family. In 2005, they had a son, Dipangkorn, who was even considered a possible future heir to the throne. Yet everything soon changed. In 2014, Shrirasmi's family became embroiled in a major corruption scandal. Her relatives were arrested and convicted, while the princess herself was forced to renounce her title and effectively disappeared from public life. According to rumors, she lived on a substantial allowance and remained under quiet surveillance.
Only a few years later, on the eve of his coronation in 2019, Vajiralongkorn made an unexpected move. Just days before the ceremony, he married his bodyguard, former flight attendant Suthida Tijai. She immediately received the title of queen, and the decision came as a complete surprise, even to the court. It seemed the monarch himself enjoyed breaking traditions and shocking society. But the true sensation came with the appointment of another woman, his longtime companion Sininat Wangvajirapakdi, as the official royal consort. This title had not been used for almost 100 years, and her appearance at the king's side caused a storm of discussion. She was shown in photographs riding a motorcycle, wearing a military uniform, and even piloting an aircraft.
But soon the idyll turned into scandal. In 2019, she was stripped of all ranks and status, accused of attempting to rival the Queen. And just a year later, she was suddenly reinstated, as if nothing had happened. All of these stories showed both his subjects and the world that the private life of the future monarch was not only turbulent, but almost completely unpredictable. Where once there had been strictness and symbolism, now unfolded dramas worthy of a television series. Yet behind the loud headlines and shocking details lay a more serious reality. These scandals were gradually becoming a tool through which Vajiralongkorn consolidated his power, while the court became increasingly closed and tightly controlled. When Vajiralongkorn officially ascended the throne, it became clear his reign would be unlike any other. Personal dramas and unexpected marriages were only the prologue. The real intrigue lay in how he would use his position to reshape the very structure of power in Thailand. Within months of receiving the royal title, the monarch pushed for amendments to the constitution. Previously, the king was required to appoint a regent if he stayed abroad, but Vajiralongkorn insisted on abolishing this rule. Now, he could remain in Europe for as long as he wished, while still maintaining full control over state affairs. At the same time, he was granted new powers that allowed him to act independently, even in emergency situations. The most serious changes, however, occurred in the economy. In 2017, the king declared that all assets of the Crown Property Bureau were not national wealth, but his personal property. This meant tens of billions of dollars, land plots in the center of Bangkok, shares in the largest banks and industrial corporations. What had once been considered the treasure of the nation turned into the private fortune of a single man. The military also came under his direct control.
In 2019, 2 key military units stationed in Bangkok were placed directly under the king's command. These units had previously played a crucial role in coups that shaped the nation's fate, and now they became his personal guard. For a modern constitutional monarch, this was unprecedented. He also carried out large-scale reshuffles among his advisors and close associates. Old figures tied to the government and bureaucracy were pushed aside. In their place came new people, most often military officers personally loyal to the king. Thus, the palace transformed into a center of power rather than simply a symbol of tradition.
But it was precisely these steps that sparked growing discontent in society. The younger generation, raised in the era of the internet and social media, for the first time dared to openly criticize the monarchy. In 2020, tens of thousands of students and activists took to the streets of Bangkok, demanding limits on the king's powers and transparency in the palace's finances. For Thailand, this was historic. Such calls had not been heard in decades. The authorities responded harshly. Criminal cases were opened against protest participants, and many received prison sentences under laws against crimes against the monarchy. Yet even threats and punishments could not entirely silence the voices of dissent. A sense began to form in society that the monarchy, instead of being a symbol of unity, was increasingly becoming a source of division and fear. Thus, the personal stories that once seemed like tabloid fodder gradually merged with politics, and the image of the playboy king turned into the image of a ruler who concentrated colossal power in his own hands, but at the same time lost part of the respect of his subjects. Today, Thailand faces a contradiction. On the one hand, the king possesses enormous power and wealth, having concentrated in his hands the army, finances, and palace institutions. On the other hand, the people are increasingly asking questions that until recently seemed unthinkable. Can a monarchy survive in the modern world if it is built on secrecy, fear, and absolute submission? For the older generations, the king remains a symbol of tradition. But for the young, who grew up in a globalized world, he increasingly appears as a symbol of backwardness and untouchability, incompatible with the reality of the 21st century. His life abroad, his eccentric habits, and his ostentatious wealth have become a mirror in which the people see not grandeur, but distance. The story of the Vajiralongkorn shows that the crown is not only a symbol of power, but also a trial. It can unite or it can divide.